Forum on Environmental Justice. This is the fourth in the Akron Area Interfaith Council's 5-part series, taking a look at the Biden-Harris administration's progress on key issues during its first 100 days. And we aptly land on the question, promises made, promises kept? Before we begin our program, the Reverend Tom Bodie, chaplain at Akron Children's Hospital, is going to offer us a prayer.
Spirit of life, when we look in a mirror, we fancy that we see someone of a scientific age in which we find cures for diseases, make solar panels and electric cars, build super colliders to explore the components of atoms, and fly helicopters on Mars. We have even taken pictures of the Earth from outer space, reckoning that we have even reached your vantage point. From your vantage point, however, you must reckon that we have yet to recreate a tree, a sea anemone, or an atmospheric layer. Indeed, you must wonder when we will finally turn our gaze from chemicals and coal, pesticides and GMOs, hormone-fed animals and heat-seeking missiles. This evening, we take up the impact of our policymaking and the focus of our science as it impacts our own climate. We propose new encyclicals and urban farming. We will engage over changes in national leadership and local initiative, all while never losing sight of the divine perspective. That which once offered humanity Eden and now looks forward to evidence of the stewardship worthy of Eden. Blessed be. Amen.
Thank you, Tom. Tom is a member of the Interfaith Council Committee that developed this forum in the spirit of the more than 40-year history of the council, which is to bring together diverse views in our community to work together to find solutions. The other members are Kathy Ress, Connie Dubik, Ellen Fortnoff, and Tiffany Thorne, and I'd like them to give you all a wave. Thank you. We are coming off a year that, despite hope that there could be a bright climate side to the COVID chaos, was by most environmental measures a disaster. We ran out of Latin alphabet letters to name all the hurricanes in the Atlantic. California wildfires destroyed more than 4 million acres. Carbon dioxide hit its highest level in the atmosphere in 650,000 years, and our country is spending nearly 10 times what it spent in the 1980s to recover from natural disasters. But there also is some reason for optimism. The cost of renewable energy is dropping. The amount of money invested in green and sustainable bonds doubled last year. More than 50 native tribes have joined together for a climate action plan they began in the year 2010. New Zealand has begun an unprecedented program to eliminate invasive species, and government websites in the United States, again, not only acknowledge the scientific consensus about climate change, but outline concrete steps to combat it. Examining the issues and the big and small ways to address climate change will be our guests. William S. Jordan III, retired Dean of the University of Akron School of Law, Sister Marguerite Chandler of the Dominican Sisters of Peace, and Bhakta Rizal, a Bhutanese refugee and co-founder of Shanti Community Farms, who's here with his partner, Tom King. Before we learn more about and from them, I'd like to remind everyone that this evening is a conversation with a purpose, and we look forward to you all contributing your thoughts and questions via the chat function of Zoom. Deb Klein of Cleveland Jobs with Justice has more on the technical end of things.
Good evening, everyone. Everyone will be staying on mute for the length of the discussion tonight. So we do ask that you use the chat for your questions, and Schultze will be monitoring those and asking the questions for you. So just remember, you will all be on mute, and welcome, and turn it back over to you, Schultze.
Thanks. And now a bit more on our guests. Bill Jordan's 32 years teaching law at Akron included more than 20 years focusing on environmental law. Before that, he was attorney advisor at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and spent 7 years specializing on public interest environmental litigation, including regulation of nuclear power, and Clean Water Act enforcement. Reflecting on the environment from both faith and cultural perspectives will be our other guests, Sister Chandler and Mr. Rizal, who's here, as I said, with his partner, Tom Crane. Sister Chandler sits on the Crown Point Ecology Center Board of Directors, whose mission is to demonstrate the practical applications of ecology and to connect spirituality, social justice, and environmental protection. She's also a certified spiritual director and on the staff of Shepherd's Corner Ecology Center in Blacklick, a 160-acre ecological ministry of the Dominican Sisters of Peace. As with tens of thousands of his countrymen and women, Bhakta Rizal was exiled from Bhutan and spent more than a decade in a refugee camp in Nepal, where he and friends established a school. He came to the United States on a college scholarship and established group homes for seniors and disabled people before moving to the Akron area. In North Hill, he and Mr. Crane established the nonprofit Shanti Community Farms to enhance the agricultural heritage of immigrants and to share culture and skills. Bill Jordan, will go to you first, asking you to launch a discussion by outlining the steps you see the Biden administration taking regarding climate justice.
Great. Thank you, Schultze, and good evening, everyone. It's a great honor to be with you and to be with ML Schultze, whom I've been listening to for years. That's really awesome.
More than my husband has.
My task is to discuss environmental developments in the first 100 days of the Biden administration. I want to start with a little context from Ohio and the Akron area. Just the other day, I heard a report that Ohio agriculture is largely responsible for the algae blooms that strangle Lake Erie. I've seen far more warnings this year about the need to stay inside due to unhealthy air quality in our region. Climate impacts threaten our forests as voracious insects move north. We recently dodged a bullet when citizen outrage forced the mayor of Akron to withdraw his proposal to allow fracking around and under the reservoir that serves this region. Fortunately, citizen activism has also achieved a dramatic reversal last November and again in the Georgia special election in January. We are experiencing the most dramatic shift in environmental policy in American history. The Trump administration was committed to extraction, exploitation, and unrestrained business activity without regard to the health and well-being of the American people or the environment. Under these policies, the Cuyahoga would soon burn again, and the polar ice caps would soon be gone. From his first day in office, President Biden committed his administration to the most pro-enforcement policies we have ever seen. In his most dramatic act, he signed an order accepting the Paris Climate Agreement and every article and clause thereof on behalf of the United States of America. He also issued Executive Order 13990 titled Protecting Public Health and Restoring Science to Tackle the Climate Crisis, which directed government actions across the whole range of environmental concerns. He specifically directed federal agencies to take action to address Trump administration regulations and actions that conflict with national objectives of protecting the public health and the environment and combating climate change. I will get to some of the details of President Biden's actions shortly, but I want to begin with another dramatic change: his appointments to the key positions related to environmental policy and regulation. This group brings to the task a strong commitment to environmental protection, many years of experience, and broad diversity of experiences. The Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, the first Native American to serve in the cabinet, with the perspective of the first woman elected to chair the Laguna Pueblo Development Corporation Board of Directors, where she fought for policies and commitments to earth-friendly business practices. The Department of the Interior oversees national assets ranging from the national parks to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, oil, gas, and minerals on federal lands, ocean resources, and the National Wildlife Refuge System. President the president's domestic climate advisor, Gina McCarthy. She was President Obama's EPA administrator, and she was the former president of the Natural Resources Defense Council. The EPA administrator, Michael Regan, he is the first African-American in that post. Former head of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, described by NRDC as a seasoned fighter in the battle for clean air and a champion of environmental justice. The head of the Council on Environmental Quality, Brenda Mallory, the first African-American in the position, former CEQ general counsel, and top EPA official. Her job is to reinvigorate this crucial agency, which Trump had kicked to the side. The Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, to play a major role in achieving net zero carbon emissions. The Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, the former governor of Iowa, and also Obama's Secretary of Agriculture, responsible for agriculture-related programs and the national forests. He is placing a renewed emphasis on climate change. These appointees bring a refreshing and important depth and breadth of experience and a commitment to science that contrasts sharply with the Trump appointees. Equally important, President Biden is taking what NRDC calls a powerful whole of government approach. In addition to appointing the right people to each agency, he insists that they break down the usual silos and integrate their work across the federal government and across the different areas of pandemic relief, economic relief, racial equity, environmental protection, and climate, because he recognizes that all are interrelated. Turning to climate change, I'll start again with appointments. As Politico said on Earth Day last week, Biden's ambition is breathtaking. He has recruited the climate equivalent of America's 1992 Olympic Dream Team. In addition to the folks I already mentioned, he recruited Jigar Shah to take over the Department of Energy's long dormant loan office, which will play a key role in the investments we must make to address climate change. This may seem like an obscure appointment, but Shah was the founder of the pioneering solar firm Sun Edison, and then the billion-dollar green infrastructure firm Generate Capital. Think about it. This is an extraordinarily wealthy man who chose to become a mid-level government bureaucrat to fight climate change. Another example is Brian Deese, head of Biden's National Economic Council, who was the head of sustainable investing at BlackRock when the investment firm built itself as a business leader on climate issues. These are two of many examples of Biden's determination to place people of vast experience and deep expertise at all levels of government. On January 20th, as I said, he rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement. He also directed action to reduce methane emissions, reinstate ambitious fuel economy standards, reinstate appliance efficiency standards, and reinstate stronger standards for hazardous air pollutants. He also took direct aim at fossil fuels by canceling the permit for the Keystone Pipeline, ordering review and reinstatement of the reduction of the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments, placing a moratorium on oil and gas activities in the Arctic Refuge, and reinstating withdrawal of offshore areas of Arctic waters and the Bering Sea from oil and gas drilling. He created the National Climate Task Force and appointed John Kerry as the first ever Special Envoy for Climate, and added that position to the National Security Council. On Earth Day last week, President Biden held a World Leaders Climate Summit, at which he committed the US to a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 levels by 2030, an extraordinarily bold challenge. And to reach those ambitious carbon targets, he will assure equity by directing 40% of investments to poor and BIPOC communities. He is also proposing the Great American Jobs Plan that we know as the $2 trillion infrastructure bill. That bill will expand wind power with 44,000 jobs overall, 33,000 in offshore wind, and it will avoid 78 million metric tons of CO2 per year. That would make a huge investment in electric vehicles, installing charging stations, and providing tax credits to buy American-made electric cars. It would provide tax incentives for renewable energy, and it would double offshore wind development. Turning to our public lands, in addition to ordering review and restoration of our national monuments, President Biden has set a goal of protecting 30% of US lands and waters by 2030. By contrast with Trump, who made the largest reductions in public lands in American history. Trump also weakened what is known as the Regional Haze Rule, which protects visibility in our national parks and also protects the public health. The Biden administration will reverse these changes and protects the parks, which have been called America's best idea. One of the most damaging aspects of the Trump administration was its total aversion to science. President Biden reversed that position immediately. He has issued executive orders to be guided by the best science and protected by processes that ensure the integrity of federal decision-making. Perhaps the most notorious acts of the Trump administration were to undermine and deny science in the guise of mere housekeeping. These are rules and procedures that seem neutral or technical on their face, but that can dramatically affect decisions about the public health and welfare. In an egregious example, the Trump administration grossly distorted consideration of the social costs of carbon in environmental decision-making. The social cost of carbon is the dollar value of the various damages caused by carbon emissions. The higher the social cost of carbon, the more we should spend to control carbon emissions. The Trump administration claimed costs as low as $7 per ton in carbon damage. In Executive Order 13390, President Biden directed that agencies must consider the full social costs of carbon, nitrous oxide, and methane. An interagency working group on the social costs of greenhouse gases is to make recommendations no later than June 1st, 2021. That number, the social cost of carbon, could reach as high as $125 worth of harm per ton of carbon emissions. That makes an enormous difference to the decisions that the government will make about protecting us from carbon emissions. On January 15th, 2021, just 15 days before leaving office, the Trump administration adopted the misleadingly named rule, strengthening transparency in pivotal science, underlying significant regulatory actions and influential scientific information. The rule would require researchers to disclose the raw data involved in their public health studies before the agency could rely upon the conclusions in those studies. It would apply this new set of standards to so-called dose response studies, which evaluate how much a person's exposure to a substance increases the risk of harm. Dose response studies have been crucial to setting standards. For example, the standards that eliminated lead in gasoline. Astonishingly, the Trump rule would apply retroactively to regulations already in place. So we could have seen the elimination of existing protections based upon this so-called transparency rule. Many of the nation's leading researchers and academic organizations, however, argue that the rule's criteria will actually restrict EPA from using some of the most consequential research on human subjects, because that research often includes confidential medical records and other proprietary data that cannot be released because of privacy concerns. A former director of the EPA Science Advisory Board said the rule sounds good on the surface, but this is a bold attempt to get science out of the way so special interests can do what they want. Before the inauguration, a court had already sent the rule back to EPA for failure to follow procedures. But a procedural loss can be turned around by changing procedures. The Biden administration immediately asked the court to vacate the rule as unauthorized. If it wasn't authorized, it could never be put in place. The court vacated it and sent it back to EPA. On January 11th, just 9 days before leaving office, Trump's Department of the Interior adopted a rule instructing the agency to use all existing climate models, not just those with scientific credibility, in assessing climate impacts. The Biden administration will insist on credible science in all of its decisions. I'm sure you've heard of the Endangered Species Act. It is the most important wildlife conservation law in history. It requires the protection of threatened and endangered species from the bald eagle to the spotted owl and many more. As I'm sure you know, we have thriving bald eagles right here at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. To protect endangered species, we have to protect their habitat, which means the added benefit of protecting vast natural areas from development. Trump failed to list species or protect habitat, and he issued rules weakening Endangered Species Act protections. The Biden administration is reviewing those rules to return to previous protections, including protection of the gray wolf, which Trump would have left behind. You've probably also heard of environmental impact statements. The National Environmental Policy Act, which we call NEPA, requires an environmental impact statement for major federal actions significantly affecting the quality of the human environment. That's things like nuclear plants, which require federal permits, highways, pipelines, transmission lines, military bases, and much more. It normally takes a few years to prepare a careful and accurate EIS. Trump changed the rules to limit public review of federal infrastructure projects in order to speed permitting of freeways, power plants, and pipelines. And he also required hard deadlines on completing reviews, deadlines that were much shorter than current and historical realities, deadlines that were too short to do a decent job. Brenda Mallory, the new head of the Council on Environmental Quality, plans to redo the NEPA rules in the first 100 days. I haven't looked, but I hope she's just about done. California has long had the authority to adopt vehicle emission regulations it deems necessary to combat its dreadful problems with air pollution. So in general, there would be nationwide emissions limitations on automobiles, and California could impose stricter limitations. And of course, they are always stricter than the national limitations because they're dealing with Los Angeles and such terrible problems. Well, with California's stricter regulations, other states had the choice to follow California's lead, and many often did. The Trump administration withdrew that authority. Biden will reinstate California regulatory authority with respect to emission standards for automobiles. Even the birdies weren't safe under Trump. He gutted protections of the Migratory Bird Act, which prohibits harm to migratory birds. His rules required the government to prove intent in order to punish someone who harms migratory birds. But no one intends to harm the birdies, do they? That's no help against oil spills and other industrial harms. You wouldn't be able to punish them for what they've done to the birds. The Biden administration is starting to walk back those changes. Trump even stopped payments to the Green Climate Fund, which helps poor nations address climate change. He apparently didn't realize that we all breathe the same air and live on the same planet. Biden will resume those payments. There is so much more we could cover. I've barely touched the tip of the iceberg. And by the way, Biden's policies on climate change might even protect icebergs. The president of the Natural Resources Defense Council said recently that President Biden has by far the most aggressive and ambitious climate agenda in history. Truly, Biden's first 100 days have been for the history books. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Sister Chandler, could you elaborate a bit on how you see the blending of spiritual and practical playing out in our community when it comes to the environment?
Thank you. My response to the environmental issues from the Catholic standpoint will be based on Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si. May 2015, Pope Francis signed Laudato Si, the watershed encyclical letter that called the world's attention to the increasingly precarious state of our common home. This encyclical was addressed to all peoples of the earth, not just Catholics. Pope Francis provides an extensive assessment of the present state of the environment. He includes pollution, climate change, the depletion of natural resources such as clean water, loss of biodiversity, the breakdown of human environment in our communities, and global inequality. Since everything is connected, we need an integrated approach to the problem. And this approach is referred to as integral ecology. Much has happened politically, as we just heard, since 2015. After 6 years, the encyclical appears ever more relevant. The multiple cracks in the planet that we inhabit, from the melting of the ice caps in the Arctic to the raging wildfires in the Amazon, from extreme weather patterns around the world to unprecedented levels of loss of biodiversity that sustain the very fabric of life, are too evident and detrimental to be ignored anymore. Pope Francis' prophetic words continue to ring in our ears. What kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to the children now growing up? The poor communities around the world are already the early and disproportionate victims of the current ecological degradation, and we cannot remain indifferent any longer to the increasingly desperate cry of the earth and cry of the poor. The 5th anniversary of the encyclical came in the midst of another watershed moment, a global pandemic. The encyclical can indeed provide the moral and spiritual compass for a journey to create a more caring, inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable world. We have, in fact, a unique opportunity to transform the present groaning and travail into the birth pangs of a new way of living together, bonded together in love, compassion, and solidarity, and a more harmonious relationship with the natural world, our common home. Truly, COVID-19 has made clear how deeply we are all interconnected and interdependent. As we begin to envision a post-COVID world, we need above all an integral approach, as everything is closely interrelated, and today's problems call for a vision capable of taking into account every aspect of the global crisis. This year in May begins a platform program based on Laudato Si, a 7-year plan to combat climate change. The action plan targets 7 specific groups, including families and parishes and schools. It addresses 7 areas of need, which are response to the cry of the poor, response to cry of the earth, ecological economics, adoption of simple lifestyles, ecological education, ecological spirituality, and community action and advocacy. The first chapter of Laudato Si covers what is happening in our common home. It centers on the scientific consensus that climate change is problematic and is a huge threat to the environment, water supply, and biodiversity. It emphasizes that the climate crisis is disproportionately impacting those who are poor. In chapter 5, Pope Francis calls for a dialogue on environmental policy at all levels, international, national, and local. As we've just heard, President Biden is working on this with multiple national initiatives. And he hosted an International Leaders Summit just last week. The gravity of the ecological crisis demands that we look to the common good, embarking on a path of dialogue that demands patience, self-discipline, and generosity. Religion and science, not just economic interest, should drive decision-making. Pope Francis calls for the whole human family to come together for a solution. And this series of programs of the Akron Area Interfaith Council is a step toward that. Pope Francis, in his congratulatory call to Biden after Biden's election, emphasized areas of common ground between the church's social teachings and the Biden administration's priorities, including addressing the crisis of climate change. On his campaign website, Biden quoted Laudato Si. There are many groups on the internet that are working for sustainability. They offer both information on the issues and actions to address these problems. Catholic Climate Covenant, Ohio Environmental Council, Interfaith Power and Light, Yale Climate Connection are just a few. In the Akron area community, we have many examples of people currently addressing climate change. Shanti Community Farms, which you will hear about next, and Edgerton Community Garden in Highland Square are examples of combining the support of healthy food and healthy community. Kent State University Fieldhouse has over 1,700 solar panels. Some things the Catholic community is doing. The Catholic high schools have been leaders on ecology projects and sustainable facilities renovations. The Dominican Sisters of Peace are seriously committed to combating climate change everywhere we serve. To that end, in addition to Crown Point board, I helped present a program on Laudato Si last year at Our Lady of the Elms School. Camp Christopher has implemented sustainability, environmental content, and land stewardship practices in all their efforts. St. Hilary Parish Fairlawn has a very active parish care for creation team. Crown Point and Camp Christopher staff were co-hosts on an environmental outdoor film night in September 2019, and they hope to resume that this year. Crown Point Ecology Center donates food to the Akron Canton Regional Food Bank while training future farmers. We can all adopt more climate-friendly personal habits, reduce the use of electricity and water, recycle, reduce the use of plastics, combat food waste. We can always do more, but wherever you are on the sustainability scale, the key is to be realistic with yourself, choose something doable for you, and when that is comfortable, add another practice. These lifestyle changes are challenging at first, but then become natural. Influence groups you are with to do the same. Meetings should cut out styrofoam and bottled water, reduce paper products and packaging. Lastly, I believe the most important thing we can all do is go outdoors and absorb the wonder of creation. We need this to have hope in working together for the future of our species and the future of our common home. If we glance outside our window or take a slow walk in nature, what message might we hear? Perhaps bare trees silently bursting forth in spring, a shoot making its way through a crack in a sidewalk, birds of different species sharing food under the bird feeder. Akron has many wonderful areas to safely enjoy nature. Summit County Metro Parks, Cuyahoga Valley National Park, Cyberling Nature Realm come to mind. As people of faith, we must have hope that we who created this problem have the intelligence and skills to solve it. Taking care of this wonderful planet that is our home is worth a little inconvenience. But is it inconvenience if we are doing it out of love? Can we find new ways to dwell in our common home? Simplify our life, focus on enjoying what we have and who we get to share it with, rather than what we want or think we need. As an interfaith community, we join hands and heart support each other in this important effort. Our diversity is a gift to each other. We must be at peace with Earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sister. Mr. Rizal, you come from a culture that traces its literal roots to agriculture over centuries. Can you and Mr. Crane talk about the connection between the earth and agriculture as a bridge among the ages and among the cultures?
Okay. Should I start now?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for AAIC that they have introduced me in such a big program and with a smart people and smart and intellectual people. And also I'm very much thankful to Kathy Rist and Tom Brady to introduce me as well. And I'm very happy to ML with ML Shelters. Actually, my name is Bhakta Rizal. I am from Bhutan. Bhutan is a small, tiny Himalayan country in between China and India. I became a refugee in 1993. I was only 17 years of age, and I relocated in eastern part of Nepal. Spent almost 14 years in the camp and got a scholarship to come to United States. But Bhutan, being very small, they are very fortunate because Bhutan is carbon neutral country. Though they are very much rude for us, but at least they are enjoying that kind of nature because nature has gifted that country. Country is totally covered by 70% of the country is covered by forest. And the policy of the government at the time when I grew up was, if you cut one plant, we have to plant another plant to replace it. So that is how we protect the forest in that small, tiny country. And doing the agriculture, we do the agriculture very environmentally friendly agriculture kind of things. We never use any chemical fertilizers, number one. Number two, we never use any kind of a machine to plow the field. What we use there is, we use auction. We use all kind of tools to plow the land instead of using big machine and tractors and producing all carbon dioxide kind of things. That is how we protect the environment. And second thing we did in agriculture is basically we never throw any kind of a waste material. We dump it we dig it on the ground and bury it, and we use as a manure. So that is how we practice that one. But in 1993, when I became a refugee and came to the camp, in the camp, every single day I saw like little kids are dying because of malnutrition and this, that, no sanitation, no hygiene. And at least we can see like 5, 6 children and old senior people are dying, because there is no sanitization, because everybody, they goes and just, throw up, poops, everything. So basically, I joined the grid because I graduated only high school, and I was only like 3rd generation to go to school even in that country. So I decided, just to open a small school and let educate these people. Education is very important so that we can protect at least. So basically we opened the school and then we invited people. We started teaching, how to eat healthy, how to make like even a toilet and then go there. And then we dig the ground and we, with the bamboo fencing, we made a toilet and all. And then we started teaching people, how to use that one. And then the United High Commissioner for Refugee, they came and then they started, recognizing us. And then they started building the things. So that way we are at least, like saved in that camp environmentally, so to say, Then after I moved to United States, and when I really see my pronunciation is not very much good. I'm trying very hard.
Just fine.
very hard for me. And so I want to just reconnect, like agriculture and environment, how we can connect, how we can live naturally, kind of things, how we can do the agriculture safely, like urban agriculture safely here. That is why I joined with Mr. Tom Crane, and we started a small community farm, because here in United States, because we even like, I have never seen even a car when I grew up in that country. We use horses, we ride in the horse, go like miles and miles in the horse. So there is no any pollution because I have never seen even a car. So, and then when I came to here in the United States, it's a different kind of a world. It's concrete, totally, a lot of buildings, little bit of forest. When I landed in New York and like in Los Angeles, oh God, I see only concrete and concrete jungle, there, and a lot of car running here and there. So it is a different world for me, but it's a developed country comparing to when I was back in our Bhutan. But when we see the environment and climate, because the carbon oxide producing here in the United States is very huge, they produce a lot. So why not we practice some kind of safe kind of agriculture, and we joined together and we started. So then we started our farm, and we collected, we partners with high school and middle school, Jennings Middle School and North High School. And after school, we do the after school program. We just go, and then the kids will come in our garden and they learn about the plant and how it is saved. We collect all the waste material from even the schools, and then we just dump it and make a peat, and we use as a manure, that one. Do you want to say something about sustainable agriculture?
Yeah, and my background is I come from Minneapolis, so I always worked in the public schools. And so, when the Somalis first came and the Hmong population, it was the same thing. They were all farmers, and there was a lot of vacant land, a lot of, abandoned properties, vacant lots. And so I worked with the public schools and working with the immigrant population to get them back on the land. And so when I relocated to Akron, I was really excited. I got to do the exact same thing, but with a different group, the Nepalis and now the Congolese. So I worked with the Akron Public Schools, and then Bhakta and I worked at a charter school as well and introduced these programs. So what we know is, it's like 80-90% of the immigrants here are from farms. They have agricultural backgrounds. And we know, like the older generation, the generation like me, when they're taken off of the farm, the language barrier, they're not able to, work up to the capacity that, they're trained for and all that. A lot of depression, suicide in that generation. And I just see a transformation when we get these families out there and get them, working on even little, double lots and all that, growing food. And you can just see the transformation. It's so cool. And what we want to ensure is that the younger generation, who probably most of them about to left the camps when they were probably elementary school age, So they kind of remember working the land with their parents and all that as a little kid. So we want to make sure, that generation also keeps up the agricultural heritage. And then we have something called Yard Corps, where they're like little young ambassadors, where we take them out to residences, and businesses, and we have them working in the gardens, mowing the lawns, that kind of thing for people to see. And it's like the work ethic is incredible. It's just an honor to be working with them. And then what people don't know is that sustainability is just inherent. I mean, they don't realize that they're sustainable farmers, but when you work side by side with them, it's like I learn all kinds of things about the soil and, you know, gathering native seeds and, you know, even weeds, like I'm pulling out weeds and they're going, no, 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 that we can use that, you know, for tea. Don't throw that, you know, stuff like that. So there's just so much we can learn, you know, from the immigrants here in the area of sustainability. Yeah.
You know, yeah, it is very, very much critical, you know, to protect our environment and teach our younger generation, you know, how we can be do some kind of things very much friendly, you know, like saving. Even they don't know, they go to the park and then throw the stuff, you know, and then we teach them to collect and then put it in the bin, you know, and so this kind of stuff we are just teaching to the students, and you know, to stay environmental friendly. So thank you very much for giving
Thank-
me the opportunity to talk about our programs. And
Well, thank you all. And we do already have some questions that have come in from folks who have been listening. One of the questions on the bigger scale is, as you pointed out, Bill Jordan, Biden very quickly has reversed policies that Trump put in place. But Trump very quickly had reversed policies that President Obama had put in place. So what we have is a whipsawed issue, a whipsawing of an issue that is a long time in the making and will take a long time in the resolution, and depends very much on an administration that is interested in these. How can things be more permanent? How can we set a path that doesn't change every 4 years or even every 8 years?
Oh. Yes, I was just going to make that point, because Biden was able to make the changes because Trump had only made changes that were at the presidential level and hadn't gotten congressional change. Yes, you need Congress to act. And, you know, the hopeful part of me says, get them to listen to Sister Marguerite and get them to see Bhakta's programs. And maybe you can reach their souls that way. But I'll be blunt. I don't really think, Judith said, how do we persuade Congress to legislate these actions? I don't really think we do. I think you have to change Congress. Certainly in the politics the way they are today, it's very hard to bring the two parties together, and even with the best reasoned arguments you can possibly make. So the highest priority is you have to change Congress. Now, the arguments that you make in general in doing that, and I think you focus on jobs, and you focus on jobs, and you pretty much focus on jobs and children and their future. But fundamentally, you got to change Congress.
The Attorney General of Ohio is among the roughly 20 Republican AGs who are suing President Biden over the cancellation of the XL pipeline. And Ohio itself has been crisscrossed with oil and gas pipelines in the last decade. So given the reality of where Ohio is politically, not even looking at changing Congress, what do you do in Ohio to raise the environment as a greater issue?
Well, that's of course a great question. With respect to the Attorney General's lawsuit, my reaction to that is that it is such a bizarre. I don't know whether I don't know if the claim is any good, but the proposition that Ohio has some standing to make that argument seems to me ridiculous. But think about it. I mentioned one of these. The mayor of Akron wanted to allow fracking under Lake Rockwell, and the citizens rose up and said no, and he pulled back. And we've seen some progress being made on the algae problem in Western Lake Erie. You have to make it clear that what's happening on the agricultural fields in Western Ohio is affecting the jobs on Lake Erie. It's affecting the produce from Lake Erie. It's affecting the people who use Lake Erie. We have to show that these kind of environmental harms harm each of us in order to make some kind of change.
Sister Chandler, you're nodding. Did you have something to add?
Just we're all connected.
Well, and speaking of connection, one of the questions here is how can we participate in the Laudato Si platform that you referred to?
You would go, there is a website for the Laudato Si Action platform. And it's going to be starting to roll out, some of it next month and some not starting till November. But yes, you can see descriptions of the actions that are suggested right now and just join in. Yes, that would be great.
So don't wait
Right.
for somebody else to do it. Okay. Mr. Rizal, there's a question here wanting to know what has been the biggest adjustment for the Bhutanese in farming here in the United States as opposed to in Bhutan and even in the camps in Nepal.
It is a huge, because here in the United States, the farmer actually, they came here, they are already 40 years and above, and their language is very little or no English, and they don't understand which area is good for agriculture, which area is even permitted, to do the agriculture, and then they don't have even an idea of testing the soil, because back in Bhutan, all the land is very much virgin land and it's pristine, so they can do and just throw the seed and it will just grow there. Here is totally different, because they have to put the manure, and then what kind of, if they want to buy, go to the store, they don't know how to read even name. And then which one is very suitable, because they have to test the soil here, because soil has been, used in different kind of chemical, this, that. So they have to send a soil test, bring a sample, and then even they do the soil test, they don't know how to read, and then which things they have to take it out, what things they have to add in the soil. So these are the problem they are facing right now, That's the difference between what they have done and what they are doing here. So they are struggling, but still we are trying to help and see in the long run where we will be.
Related a bit to that question, do you grow plants and herbs that are used for medicinal purposes on the farms? I think there's a rich tradition and knowledge of using certain plants for health and well-being. It would be wonderful to continue that knowledge.
Yeah, because when you look back, I have seen a lot of yogas are done in Bhutan. Bhutan, we don't have that much hospital. And what we used to do is just we grow some herbs, that is our medication. And then we use summon, like Western doctor, they come visit us instead of trained physician visiting us, So we grew in that perspective or that kind of, things. So here also, like even okra, okra is very good for diabetes. If you just soak the okra in the evening, drink 1 glass of okra, you'll eventually after 1 month, people are throwing their medication. So there are a lot of things we can use as the medicines, That is what we practice back in Bhutan, and we are also using that kind of herb here as well.
There's a community in Northeast Ohio. We're moving to the some of the environmental changes and the resistance in Ohio, the fear of some of the environmental changes and the cost to jobs. And I'm thinking particularly of Lordstown. Looking at that community, it is on the plus side, developing an electronic pickup truck that's an EV. GM is building electronic batteries there for cars and for vehicles. But a lot of people's lives were very disrupted by the closure of the old Chevy plant, and they view this change with fear. So how do we balance people's level of comfort with what they know and what has sustained them and their families, sometimes for generations, with the need to adopt some new ways of looking at things and doing things? I put that question to all of you.
I'll take a crack at it initially. It seems to me that's exactly what President Biden is trying to do with fossil fuels in general and the coal industry in particular. We have to keep those people in mind. I think one of the great failings of the Democrats over the years has been the failure to do that. So yes, we have to have training programs. We have to be able to convince people that there are jobs that they can do, that they'll be cleaner and safer for them than the ones. After all, coal has killed so many people. There are lots of jobs they can take that won't kill them, but probably we've got to convince them to move somewhere, and that's going to be the big tough one.
Anything to add to that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
What I want to advocate for is there's so much vacant space, like abandoned properties, like even around the city and around the county, that we are right now very challenged because a lot of our families were scattered all over the place. And we know, we're aware that there are parcels of like 10 acres or more around that are not being used, that can be great for working farms. And so we just, want to advocate for that we really need, and quite a few communities around the country have done this, to get one spot where we can have, a really good working farm for the refugees. Just wanted to throw that in there, because we know about the parcels that are sitting around not being used.
Are you talking about a larger
Yes.
property?
Yes, 10 acres or more. That the city doesn't know what to do with. The county doesn't know what to do with. We know what should be done with them. So we're in the process of trying to consolidate all of the little parcels that we have right now into one big educational farm. So that's our new mission.
Okay. I know we're focused on federal and very local, but I keep going back to Ohio because we have a budget bill that's already passed the Ohio House that strips away much of the funding that Governor DeWine wanted to upgrade Ohio's drinking and stormwater infrastructure. And I guess this is a different version of what can we do at the federal level, what can we do at the state level as this heads through the Senate.
Well, you want to try to influence the senators. I have to say my reaction is you need to change the Senate, but we can't do that on this bill. But another one that occurs to me is the restrictions that have been put on wind farms in Lake Erie. I mean, this restrictions they've put on wind energy, not just in Lake Erie, but actually on land, are crippling to wind energy. So they're crippling to renewables. That has to change.
Any other thoughts? I mean, we also, again, at the state level, scandal derailed the attempt to bail out the nuclear industry, but left in place the part of the bailout package that was for coal. Where do we go with these kind of issues at the state level?
I think you know my answer.
Any other directions? Prayer sounds like one.
Yeah, prayer. Education.
What about the mitigation of climate change impacts? How do we make the costs of the future not seem like something abstract and down the road, but a part of what's going on now?
That's a great question, because that is one of the biggest problems with addressing climate change. You may remember that we are famous for having a burning river, and that burning river burned just before the enactment of the Clean Water Act, a couple of years before enactment of the Clean Water Act. It helps to have a disaster to prompt new legislation or to prompt sensible action. You need some way of getting to people that this is This will affect you or perhaps your grandchildren. And go ahead, sister.
I was just agreeing with you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much education that needs to be done, and how we reach people to make them understand how important it is. It's a real challenge.
You talk about young people, and at least a couple of years ago, there was a lot of young people were taking the lead on these issues because it's not so abstract to them. This is within their lifetime. Is there a way to continue to harness that energy? Is there a way to encourage younger people?
Get them outside, get outdoor classrooms so they have direct experience, you know, with the land and growing food, and understanding that our current industrial food process is killing us, basically. I mean, we work with the kids and we see them starting out, the ones that have recently come to this country, with very good, healthy snacks that their parents have made. And then the ones that have been around for too long, all they want to do is go to McDonald's, have pop, have the sugar, that kind of stuff. And so I'm just saying that I think what we need to do is
Educate.
educate the kids, but it's not just in the classroom. They have to be out experiencing and doing things active, you know, in those areas. And there's a lot of really good teachers out there that understand that, you know, that bring the kids outside, you know, with soil samples and seedlings, and then kind of explaining the whole process. But you know, we're all for the advocates of, you know, the outdoor classroom, and have them working directly with what they're learning about, you know, the environment and, you know, food, local food, how important that is. And what is so crazy is that the immigrants that just come here recently, they're the ones with all the good habits. They're the ones who in great physical shape, they're eating the right things, but then American culture corrupts them when they get too exposed to our fast food, you know, getting in cars, driving, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see that, you know, transformation. Like, I can identify a kid that just got here from another country because of all the good habits that they have, the work ethic and all that. And then I can identify his friend who has been here too long, you know, and experienced American culture. And it's amazing the difference between the two.
Well, Judith Nardi may have an answer for what you were raising earlier. She said she just read the city of Akron is starting a study on what to do with abandoned land that the land bank owns. So this would be a great time to contact the city and ask to be part of that study.
Yes, and in fact, the land bank is one of our clients. But, yeah, we mow lawns for them, you know, their property. So yeah, we're in touch. But yeah, thank you.
And the president of the land bank is one of my former students.
You've done good.
And is this the same fellow who was also on the board?
Yes.
The Akron Public Schools
He was
board?
president of the Board of Education.
One of the many things that came with COVID that we wish hadn't was the disruption of what had been the start of a local food chain, what had been more and more emphasis on local growth and supply chain. And we've gone to Amazon. How does the local food network reestablish itself and get going again as a strength in this community?
Yeah, what is there? like we have to restart, we have to start and then look for the, we cannot just wait and do things, but we have to just start and do it. And I think we'll be there because we have opened a drive-through now, and we want to grow in our Santi community from local food, and then we want to prepare ourselves and then just have a snacks, snack shops kind of thing. So we have to grow one after another that way, and establish again back to normal, I guess.
If
No, we
somebody
were
wanted,
making, I'm sorry, we were making a little progress on that front with the Conservancy, the Countryside Conservancy farms, the farmers market, of course, the one out in near Peninsula, which is wonderful, but it's sort of crazy because I drive down there to get my food. But the one that we had in Highland Square for several years was attracting people from the community, and people were using their SNAP cards to get locally grown foods. And of course, that is no longer with us. Perhaps it will return, but it's just, I know it was a struggle of that particular local farmers market, but you got to bring it to people so they can take advantage of it.
there's a note here that the Akron Summit County Library has a seed bank. So be thinking about it as we hit 80-degree days.
Wow.
For better or worse.
Yeah, here in North Hill, we have Asian market, Asian groceries. Basically, they grow in and around the community, and then they will bring there and they sell it. And then we also have a farmers market in Exchange House. We partner with Exchange House here in North Hill. So basically what we do is we cultivate, and whatever we have a harvest or produce, we'll take and sell it in that Exchange House. So every other Saturday, I think we are doing it, but this year we are a little bit behind, but still we are working on it.
There are several folks who have posted in the chat that there are a lot of resources within our community. And the one cool thing that's come out of these forums is that we share with those who want us to. We share a follow-up email that gives you some links to things that are referenced here and let you go further with it. So you don't have to be scrambling to write everything down from the chat function. We'll make sure that the information goes out to you. I guess this is a question that I had to ask each of you to answer. What is the greatest cause for optimism right now about where our environment is going? Sister Chandler?
I wonder if maybe what we're learning from COVID could give us optimism on the just how much we're connected and how much we need each other. And someone just put up the power of community. Yeah. We've got to do it together. We either win or lose together.
Bill Jordan.
Yeah, I would say demographics make me hopeful. And I'm really referring to youth. I mean, youth have become more active. They become more articulate. We have an amazing example from Scandinavia, of course. And I think they have a greater appreciation for the world that we need to save, and they're going to do it for us. We hope. My generation hoped we were going to save the world, but we didn't. It's up to them now. But I think they can.
Tom and Bhakta, how about you?
I think I agree with Bill Jordan, because we have to teach our younger generation, and then see how we can help them, and only education, and learning and then coming out and experiment, will help, I guess.
And I would just say too, we get so many requests for volunteering, that people want that experience. To be out in the gardens, work side by side with the immigrants and all that. And, wow, that's so great to hear that, there's so many people that are so interested in that area. They're just afraid though, I think, to, they don't want to do it on their own, or they don't want to make mistakes. And we just say, don't worry about it. Just come out and we'll teach you. And it's not that hard. You'll learn from the immigrants and all that. So, we just really encourage volunteers, no matter what skill level, no matter what they know or don't know, to join us. And we have a lot of work, we can, put them on to help us out. So I'd say the interest is unbelievable.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you, the three of you and everyone, or the four of you and everyone else who joined us tonight, for your insights and invitations to action and optimism. Next week, we'll conclude the Interfaith Council series with an examination of the issue of economic justice. And the moderator will be WKSU News Director Andrew Meyer, and our three guests will be the University of Akron Assistant Dean of Diversity, Brant Lee, Rabbi Joshua Brown of Temple Israel, and the Reverend Michael Howard of the Living Waters United Church of Christ. If you'd like to review tonight's or our earlier sessions, we do have those available. We've been recording, and we welcome your thoughts, not only about tonight's session, but all of them. We really appreciate your input at all levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.